What's up, everybody? I'm David, and Manny's taking a break. But in this video, we're going to talk about how to keep your baby and your hatchling crested geckos alive. It is very important that you guys know that keeping a baby crested gecko or a newly hatched crested gecko or gargoyle gecko is essentially the same thing as keeping an adult. So if you can keep adults alive, you have a very good chance of keeping your babies alive. Obviously, the babies are a little more vulnerable, so you're gonna have to watch the humidity and just the heat. They are very susceptible to the heat. You don't want to go above 82 in my opinion. You want to keep them the highest 80, but usually around 75 to 78 degrees is perfect. When you guys feed your newly hatched baby crested geckos or gargoyle geckos, what we do here is basically serve in a little water bottle cap. They don't need a big bowl of food, you know. They're just, you know, not gonna eat it all, and then you're gonna stress because you're gonna think your gecko's not eating. Now, for geckos around, you know, 1 to all the way up to like 10 grams, I would give just a little water bottle cap of food. Obviously, as the gecko gets older and it starts wiping the food clean, you could probably, you know, add a little bit more, but they're not gonna need a bigger bowl really up until like 10 or 15 grams. So just watch how you feed them. Don't get stressed out if you don't see, you know, big indentations in the food bowl, because let's face it, guys, these animals are like this big and their stomach is like that big and their appetite is minuscule. So don't freak out if your gecko's not eating, because most likely it is. A healthy gecko's not going to starve itself to death. Just put the food there. If you see the poop in the paper towels, you're going to know it's eating. There's not that much to worry about. It's as easy as it gets when it comes to breeding reptiles. So basically, when setting up an enclosure for a crested gecko or a gargoyle gecko baby, I like to keep it extremely simple. Why? Because it's easier to monitor and it's easier to clean. What I do is I get a shoebox size sterilite container. I place a paper towel, very simple, no moss or peat moss or eco earth, nothing of that nature just yet. I like to put paper towel. I put an egg crate in there. They like to crawl around in the egg crate. They like to hide inside of the egg crate. And I put a fake plant in there. That's just kind of like a staple of what I do for, you know, most of the babies here. Obviously, you could put just one big fake plant, or, you know, just a couple egg crates. The furniture doesn't really matter. The geckos are not like, oh, I like plants better than egg crates, or I like egg crates better than plants. They don't really care. As long as their requirements are met and they could fit, you know, into a small hole or feel secure, they're gonna be fine. They're not gonna stress out. When you missed, you gotta be very careful, okay? I see a lot of guys out there doing, you know, making mistakes. They think that they see all of us breeders, you know, have our geckos in tubs like this, and then they start misting away. They don't have the proper ventilation, and then it could lead to, you know, serious problems with the gecko. It could, you know, give respiratory infections and, you know, things of that nature. So if you're gonna keep them in tubs, you gotta remember, you gotta provide the right ventilation. The small shoebox size containers, I like to make a screen on the top of the lid. That's gonna be enough ventilation so that you can mist pretty much every day. There should be a point in the day where the enclosure dries out. If you're keeping them like I do in a rack system, what I have started to do is make, with a drill, make bigger holes, so, and then screening it, that way they have more ventilation. But if you just have the containers in there with the little holes, you're gonna have to watch the misting very, very carefully. You don't want to mist every single day if you have it basically with, you know, that much ventilation. You need to, you know, watch your geckos. You want to make sure that the environment is humid, but not necessarily wet all the time. It's not a frog, guys. That's if you're going the shoebox or sterilite container route. If you're gonna go with like an Exoterra like those nano exoterras. You could keep your baby crested geckos in there, no problem. I just can't afford it for all the geckos I hatch. But if you only have like a pair or two and you produce, maybe like 20 babies a year or something like that, then you could definitely get some of those exoterras. You could put a couple babies in there. Usually when they start to get around 7-8 grams, I separate them. If they're in the shoebox containers, and when they're about 15 to 20 grams is when I move them from the shoebox to something bigger. But like I was saying earlier, the exoterras or the zoom enclosures that open up on the front, those have perfect ventilation, so you could be misting every day with no problem, and you're not gonna have to worry about, am I misting too much or am I misting too little. And obviously they make a way better display. Now, a lot of people always ask me, when can I start feeding the insects? When can I start feeding little crickets to my baby, and how big should they be? Usually, from my experience, the baby crested geckos, they don't start eating the crickets up until like maybe a month or so. So that's when I usually offer them. You could give them, pinheads or the small crickets, as long as not too big. Just, you gotta use kind of like common sense a little bit. If you think if you think the cricket is not gonna get through the throat of the gecko, maybe you should go a little bit smaller. I wouldn't overwhelm the gecko by throwing like 30 in there. You probably want to throw like 2 or 3. See how he reacts to them, because sometimes the little babies are so dumb that they'll get scared from the crickets. But you could see how they react to them. Sometimes some geckos will automatically know, okay, this is food, and bam, they'll hit it. You could throw a couple in there, see how they react, and then throw more from then on. You could also make sure that when you feed the insects, you want to do this at least once or twice a week, especially when they're babies and juveniles. But you want to make sure that every single feeding you dust the crickets with calcium with D3. Or another very good alternative is the Repashy Calcium Plus. It has the leopard gecko logo, leopard gecko face in the front. Another very important tip about keeping your newly hatched geckos is not to handle them. I know they're so tiny and cute and you want to hold them all day, but trust me guys, handling just increases the stress on these babies. You gotta keep in mind, they're like this big, they're very small, 1 or 2 grams, and we're 150, 160 160 pound person. We look absolutely scary, terrifying to these little animals. Make the handling to a minimum. Only handle if you need to put the baby in another container to clean the cage or something like that. But our heat that we generate from our body is gonna be it's gonna start to overheat the geckos if you handle them a lot. It's gonna give them a lot of stress, so just leave them alone. I usually like to start handling geckos. Let's say I wanted to handle a gecko as a pet. I would start handling usually when it's around 10 grams, 10-15 grams. That's when I would handle regularly. Anything smaller than that, obviously you can mess with, you can handle every now and then, but when they're newly hatched, I would stay away from handling. One of the problems we face when we're raising babies or hatchlings is shedding problems. If you're having a lot of shedding problems with a couple different geckos, you might want to try the Pedialyte solution. What you could do is add a little bit of Pedialyte to the food mix. You could put like 80% water and 20% Pedialyte when you're mixing your food, and that's gonna help pop off the shed. Next time the animal sheds, it's gonna come off a lot cleaner, and it's not gonna come up in chunks, and it won't like constrict, because it's gonna keep the gecko hydrated. Even for the adults, every once in a while, even if my geckos are not having problems, I like to mix a little bit of Pedialyte with the food, just to give them some extra electrolytes and keep them hydrated. So that's gonna wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully these little tips and tricks helped you, when raising your baby hatchlings or baby crested geckos. Until next time, the last Saturday of every month, stay tuned for a new episode of TikisGeckos. Also, don't forget to add us on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media. You best believe we have it. Just keep track with what we're doing. We have a lot of exciting news in the coming months.